the 2014 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now, the race for Public Service Commission District 4.
Good evening, I'm Richard Warner, a longtime business reporter on Georgia Radio and Television. We'd like to welcome you and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series that's originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is a debate between candidates for Public Service Commission District 4. The Public Service Commission oversees telecommunications, electric, and gas services in the state. And now let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Daniel Blackman is a consultant and also a member of the Environmental Policy Commission. Aaron Gilmer is an auditor with Automatic Data Processing, a company that provides payroll services. And Lauren Bubba McDonald has served on the Public Service Commission since 1998. Now let's meet our panelists. Raul Bali is a reporter for WGAC Radio in Augusta. Maggie Lee is a freelance reporter specializing in state government and politics. Christy Schwartz is a reporter for Energy Wire, a publication that specializes in energy sector news. This debate will consist of 3 rounds, and for more complete information on all of the rules, please visit atlantapressclub.org. Now let's get started. We'll begin tonight in the first round, where the candidates will be asked one question from a specific reporter, panelist, and one question will be posed to all of the candidates. We begin with Christy Schwartz, who has the first question for Aaron Gilmer.
Hi, Aaron. Right now we are facing what could be a significant energy policy change with a proposed rule targeting carbon emissions, and this rule is coming from the current White House administration. Let's just, for the sake of today, let's just say that that rule is written, goes into place. Keeping that in mind, I want to be clear on what you think Georgia's energy resources should be going forward. What do we need more of, less of, or what should stay the same?
First, thank you for the question. And I would be the first to say that I believe energy needs to be and remain diversified. You can't rely on any one resource, fossil fuel or green energy. And for me, fossil fuels, coal being the one that we've relied upon most here in the state of Georgia, is the one that needs to be reduced to the smallest percentage of our energy production. I think going forward, green energy, biomass, and other renewable resources will be an invaluable part of our energy production, but I want to focus mostly on energy production that would allow us to keep electrical rates low here in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Mr. Blackman, it's your turn to ask a question to the opponent of your choice.
I think you have it reversed.
Maggie, my apologies. You're up next.
Sure, thank you. My question is for Mr. Blackman. In 10 years' time, what should Georgia's energy mix look like? Please speak especially to natural gas and fracking.
Well, I mean, first of all, like Mr. Gilmore, I want to thank the candidates. I want to thank you for your question. In regards to natural gas and fracking, I don't support fracking at all. I think if we look at what's happened across the country over the last several years, it's caused a tremendous amount of indirect costs to the community. We've seen what it has done to our water systems. Right here in Georgia, I'm just going to give a quick example. There's a county called Monroe County, which has just received $2 million because they found uranium in the water wells. I don't agree with fracking in its current state. I think what we need to do over the next decade is have a more aggressive push towards renewable energy. I think what we need to do currently needs to focus on more on how our energy mix is working for the state of Georgia going forth, making sure it's prudent for the entire state of Georgia. When I look around the state right now and I see what's going on in the state, our most precious natural resource, in my opinion, is our citizens and our people. And unfortunately, many of the decisions we've made over the last decade have had a tremendous impact on our rural communities and our over 1.8 million Georgians who are suffering from poverty.
And Raul Bali, you may now ask a question of Lauren Bubba McDonald.
Commissioner McDonald, Columbia County near Augusta is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, has a significant number of construction projects throughout the county. This year alone, there's been more than 300 gas leaks. In some cases, contractors who did not use the 811 service did not follow the Georgia DIG law. under the current DIG law, the Public Service Commission can fine $10,000 per violation. First of all, do you believe that that fine is high enough and that the Public Service Commission has done enough to deal with violators of Georgia's DIG law?
Well, absolutely. I think that the Public Service Commission has taken a very aggressive effort to restrain and control construction accidents. We in Georgia are the second largest fine regulatory agency in the nation, California being first and Georgia second in that arena. What we have done in Georgia progressively is we've replaced all the old cast iron pipes on our gas systems. When you have massive construction going on and people are not following the rules that they should, yes, there are going to be incidents. Fortunately, only one fatality in our state, and that was in Cairo, Georgia. And that was strictly an error by a worker that was in the pit controlling a leak. But we have taken tremendous progress in our state on making this a very safe place to be.
So that concludes the first round in this debate. Each candidate now will ask one question to the opponent of his choice. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask that initial question. The response can last up to 1 minute, and then we're allowing 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Mr. Gilmer, your question for one of your opponents.
Thank you. My question will be for Mr. Blackman, the Democratic challenger. I'm going to loosely quote an article from Energy Wire dated June 5th, in which it states regulators in the Southeast are known for deferring to the interests of major utilities. My question to you, if elected, how would you prevent or how would you regulate the regulated entities here in the state of Georgia? Thank you.
First and foremost, I don't think it's prudent for any any regulator to receive contributions from any utility-related company. The first thing I'll do to make sure that's prudent, and I thank you for your question, is to make sure that transparency is definitely in place. I think over the last decade, what we're seeing, if you follow the Public Service Commission, is you see an overwhelming ability for utility companies to be in place to discuss issues with the Public Service Commission. However, the representation amongst the citizens has changed. I'd like to work with either the current governor or the incoming governor with making sure we reestablish the Consumer Utilities Council. It was in place up until 2008 when it was defunded by Governor Sonny Perdue, and unfortunately the public voice is currently just being overshadowed by the utility industry. I'd like to work in unison to make sure there's more of a balanced approach, and I'd like to make sure that we're doing the right thing to protect the interests of the consumers around the state of Georgia.
Mr. Gilmer, 30-second rebuttal.
I agree completely. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, sir.
Next, Mr. Blackman, it is your turn to question the opponent of your choice.
My question will be for the incumbent. We thank you for your service while you've been at the Public Service Commission. However, over the last decade, what we've seen in the state of Georgia has been Georgia being ranked in the top 10 in unemployment, in foreclosures, and in bankruptcies. And unfortunately, in the last 4 years, we've seen consistent rate increases. We've seen a rate increase almost every year for the last 4 years, as stated. And my question to you is, can you explain to the consumers, especially those that are watching, why you've consistently voted for the rate increases over the last 10 years?
Well, I'm very proud to answer that question, and of course we haven't had rate increases out over the last 4 years. We look at rate cases about every 3 years in our state, and fortunately, and we are 15% below the national average in our utility rates. Georgia has done a major effort in keeping those rates down. Unfortunately, 60% of those increases that we've had have been because of environmental impacts, those being handed down from EPA that the utility has no governance over and the Public Service Commission has no regulatory authority over. Those are mandates. The other portion, and a major portion of what a small increment of those rate cases have been, is on M&O, and that's making sure that we have the resources out there when those lines are down because of ice or a tornado comes through our state, that we're there to put the citizens back online with their utility without any major delay.
Mr. Blackman, if you choose, you have 30 seconds.
I would have to disagree with that response. I do thank you for answering the question. However, if you look over the last decade in the state of Georgia, even our most recent rate increase, our most recent change in December of 2013, even the AARP lobbied to understand why. You know, when you have senior citizens in this state, constituents that you serve that are on a fixed income and those rates go up, I believe that it's an unfair burden, and we have seen those rates increasing, but I want to yield my time and thank you for answering the question.
And finally, Mr. McDonald, you may question the opponent of your choice.
Thank you. Mr. Blackman, and I'm sure you support the laws of the state of Georgia, and I'm sure you support the residency requirements to run for this office from a particular district. And I ask, number one, have you ever been disqualified for running a race because you didn't really live in the area that was there? And second, I'll ask, you're a resident of Cumming, Georgia, in a duplex that requires only 2 people in that duplex, and there's a family of 4 in your family. Is that not correct, sir?
One, that's not correct, that I've never been disqualified. I willingly stepped out of the race in 2012 because I decided that the candidate that was ahead of me, we were both aligned with some of the same principles, and that is incorrect. Where I do live, you can check the residency and you can check my record. It's a location where it is sufficient, and we moved into a home and we upgraded, and we live under every circumstance and every criteria that would allow us to live accurately where we currently reside. So I have no residency restrictions. We've never been in that position. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald, 30-second rebuttal if you choose.
Well, I've had the privilege of visiting Mr. Blackman's residence that he has, which is 205 Summit Chase Way in Cumming, Georgia.
Summit Crossing.
Crossing Way, and the office there says that that particular unit and others like it are restricted because it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit and restricted to 2 people in each unit.
If you're just joining us, this is the debate between the candidates for the 4th District of Georgia's Public Service Commission. Now we go to our 3rd and final round in this broadcast. In this round, our panelists will question the candidates until we run out of time. And we begin with Maggie Lee, who gets the first question in this 3rd round.
Sure. Some other states have a lot more liberal regimes when it comes to small-scale solar power on roofs. It's easier for people to sell back to the grid. It's possible for people to lease out their roof space. What are the pros and cons of a more liberal small solar policy? Let me ask that to Commissioner McDonald.
Of course, under the Territorial Rights Act in Georgia that was passed in 1973, the utilities, you can't have third-party retail sales. They're established districts, and that's what it is. Anybody can put a solar array or a unit on their homes as long as they consume it themselves or sell it back to their electric supplier. There's questions that will be legislatively done dealing with third-party participation in it, but as far as the Public Service Commission is concerned, we have opened up solar in Georgia. And now today, Georgia is #1 in the nation in volunteer solar development with no upward pressure on the ratepayer and no state subsidies to support that need.
Next question, Christy Schwartz from Energy Wire.
This question is for Mr. Blackman. And sir, this question is also about solar. There's a debate about how solar should be calculated. Some argue that because it alleviates grid pressure and demand on the grid and also can lower utility bills, that its value should be higher. There's some that argue that more solar creates a system in where you've got some residents and consumers basically subsidizing others, and that rates overall will have to rise to pay for solar, and so that it is not as high as some of the proponents actually argue. So what is your take on this, and should we be having this debate now?
We should be having a debate, and you know, I'd be remiss if I can't say directly to the commissioner that he did the right thing with the investment of the 525 megawatts of solar. Georgia ranks 7th for where we are currently as far as how we can deploy the solar, but I look at states like North Carolina when there's a mutual investment. When you have a utility in North Carolina which is investing $500 million to support that, it works. But when you're over budget, as we currently are with the Vogtle expansion, it puts us in a dilemma, you know, and I think what we have to begin to do is make the right investments. I think Georgia is well in a position on the commercial side of solar to make the right investments, and over a period of time, I think we'll be in the right direction to be able to balance out how we look at renewable energy. However, However, the current model that we have, I think that it's too little too late, and I think we've got to think better about how we can allow individuals around the state, especially in rural Georgia, to be able to supply solar, including the investments and creating more partnerships around the state that can make it beneficial for our citizens.
Raul Bali from WGAC Augusta.
This question is for Mr. Gilmer. Mr. Gilmer, Georgia Power customers currently pay a nuclear energy recovery fee. Do you believe it's appropriate for ratepayers and customers to pay for a fee, and the fee is for the building of the 2 new reactors at Plant Vogtle? Do you believe it's appropriate for ratepayers to be paying for a plant that they're not receiving power from yet?
Correct. I do believe it's appropriate. I would say that I'm not a big fan of the way the Vogtle plant was set up financially, how the deal was set up initially. That would have been where I would have targeted my efforts on the Public Service Commission, was making sure to share the risk. But once you commit to the deal, yes, you do agree to share the costs, and I do think the fee is appropriate. Thank you.
Continuing with our rotation of the reporters, Maggie Lee, you're next.
Sure. A question for Mr. Blackman. You've criticized the PSC for levying a fee on Lifeline cell phone service. Their rationale was a national report about alleged fraud in the program. What would you have done differently? What would you do to counter allegations of fraud in this program?
Well, similar to the question we just heard, there's no risk-sharing mechanism in place. And what I mean by that is we're seeing increasingly consumers and ratepayers having to deal with some of the most hard challenges that they have. On the Lifeline question, that was a program that was started by the Reagan administration in the 80s, and it was made so that American citizens around this state, around the country, not just in Georgia, would have the ability to have telecommunications and access to telecommunications while they were out of work or looking for a job or trying to make sure they reintegrate into society through technology. The issue is we would have become the first state. California tried and they failed. We would have become the first state to add a $5 fee onto it. And what happens is you have to think about the people that use those phones. There's cases of fraud all over the country every day. I would have to adamantly disagree that fraud was the reason. I think there were other interests involved there. But when you put a levied burden, especially on our senior citizens in the state of Georgia, who spend the majority of that time on the phone with Social Security to make sure they can pay their bills on time, I think we do our community a disservice.
Next question from Christy Swartz from Energy Wire.
Okay. This question is for Commissioner McDonald. Commissioner, this question's about nuclear. Nuclear's been in the spotlight for the good and the bad over issues concerning safety, the economy, the environment, the emissions, and energy mix. So for hypothetical purposes, let's say there's no Vogtle 3 and 4, but Georgia Power were to come to you to say, we now want to add 2 new reactors and build Vogtle 3 and 4. How would you discuss this with them, and what would your answer be?
My answer would be, let's go forward. I voted on the nuclear plants in 2009. I support I'm a very pro-nuclear person. I know that as we look forward down the road, when we're going to have over 4 million new Georgians in our state by 2030, and as we are doing presently in decommissioning coal plants all over our state, some 14 coal plants to be decommissioned in the next few years, and as we look to the need we have to supply energy. Energy has no grounds, whether it's political, race, creed, color, or the watt goes to everybody. And for us to have the capacity to be competitive in the industrial development world, to be able to make sure that our consumers have electricity, yes, we're going to be proud. My grandchildren are going to be proud that we made the decision to have Unit 3 and 4. 5,000 plus employees down there today, the largest economic development in a decade in the state of Georgia.
Raul Bali, you're next.
This question is for all 3 candidates. In July, the FAA approved a special aviation license for San Diego Gas and Electric to use unmanned drones. In a press release from the company, it said that they would use it to reach access hard-to-reach areas and even locate power outages quickly. Is there a place for the Georgia Public Service Commission to either regulate the use of unmanned drones or the data and images that are collected? We'll start with Mr. Blackman.
I'll be very forthright. I'm not privy to that information, but my answer would be that I would not. I think that we have several security issues. Recently, over the last year, information has come out about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's internal site being hacked. When you look at our new AP1000s that are going to be going online, and you look at the type of energy we use around the country, and you look at the nuclear, the threats around the world, including ISIS and other individuals that or terrorist groups, the problem that I see with that is I don't want to see our grid compromised in any way. Where will those images go? Who will be responsible for those images? How will we keep track of them? All those are questions that we have not yet asked, and I think that'll put an unfair burden on the current commissioners to add drones when there's so little known domestically about how they've been used on foreign soil.
Select the next candidate.
Mr. Gilmore.
Yeah, as the Libertarian candidate, I would also be against the use of drones. There are significant privacy issues today, and I just can't see, unless there was a group of people that willingly opted in to the program, I would be against it completely. Thank you.
As a member of the Georgia Public Service Commission, I certainly oppose that type of regulation. I think the less regulation that we can have, the better off our industries are, better off our people are. We are an over-regulated society now. And I think that to move in this direction would be wrong, just as it would have been had we moved on solar 3, 4, 5 years ago like we did today. We waited for that perfect storm. We waited for the technology to improve. We waited for the price of the solar panels to go down, and we waited while the natural resource of our sun in Georgia is unlimited. And because of that wait, that's why we are seeing major contracts come into our state at or below the avoided cost of electricity, and it's going to prove well for us in the future.
Mr. McDonald, 15 or so years into this role, what does the average Georgian need to know about the Public Service Commission that they don't know now?
The Georgia Public Service Commission probably has as much an impact on every ratepayer in this state, or every home in this state, as any agency in state government. And to be able to, it's a very down ballot agency. There are 5 commissioners, and we on staggered terms. But in order for us to make sure that the consumer has, again, an affordable, a reliable, and a clean energy source in our state is invaluable. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that those homes, whether they're homes that are people that are less fortunate than we are, to make sure that they do have the proper support for utility bills, and we've got programs that do that. Our companies have energy efficiency that help those consumers. So there's a lot going on in Georgia, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it, and I look forward to serving it in the future.
So that's the time that we have for our questions tonight. Now each of the candidates will have 60 seconds for a closing statement, and by random selection, Mr. McDonald makes the first closing statement.
Well, I thank you, and I thank the public broadcasting for this opportunity. I appreciate my colleagues that on the commission that I serve with. I respect the candidates here that are here today with their vision of Georgia. Mine's a matter of record. You just look at it and you can see where it's come from. I'm pleased to have supporters out there in the state that have supported me in this race. And I thank the people for voting me before and putting me in this office. Now, with that said, I am not through with the vision that I have in renewable energy for Georgia. We have done a lot in the last 3 years, and especially a lot in the last year. There was not 1 watt of solar energy in the last RRP in the state last December. Today, we have almost 900 watts of solar energy coming forth in the next 2 years. I'm proud of that. Georgia leads the nation, and we will continue to do that without a mandate from the federals.
Next, again by random selection, Mr. Blackman, you can give your closing remarks.
Our closing remarks are very simple. I want to thank the panelists for being here today. I want to thank Georgia Public Broadcasting. And what I'd like to say is I want the ratepayers and the citizens of the state of Georgia to make sure they're paying attention to prudence at our Public Service Commission. When Vogtle 1 and 2 went online, it was 1,250% over budget. When we look at the numbers in the state of Georgia and the way in which we're investing money, we've got to think about the future. And there is a lot of work we have to do. I agree that we took the right step in the direction towards renewable energy. However, in the state of Georgia right now, there is an unfair burden that ratepayers have right now to consume the overall cost and the risk of the expansion of our nuclear facilities. What I'd like to do is make sure that I represent your interests and make sure that there's a more balanced approach to consumer interests at the Public Service Commission. I'd like your support. Again, my name is Daniel Blackman, and I'm here running for Public Service Commission. Thank you.
And Mr. Gilmer, it's your turn to have a closing statement.
Thank you. And I also want to say thank you to Georgia Public Broadcasting and the Atlanta Press Club. Firstly, I want to point out that my background is in audit at a time when, as you've heard, Georgia has one of the largest construction projects in the past decade, and cost overruns already top $1 billion. I'm here to offer an independent voice and an independent overwatch to a commission that doesn't necessarily independently regulate its regulated entities. I want to give the voters a choice, and I hope you'll consider voting for me for Public Service Commission. Thank you.
That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind all our viewers that the general election will be held on November 4th, a Tuesday, and that early voting is already underway. Our thanks tonight for arranging this debate to the Atlanta Press Club. They are hosting this election season and will be televising debates throughout the evening tonight, and the debates will all be archived online. You can also view them in addition to atlantapressclub.org, also at gpb.org. The Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series is made possible by a donation from R. Charles Loudermilk. And that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Richard Warner. Good night.
This is a GPB original production.